Okay, a small note to myself, no music over me talking because nobody can understand that. Especially because my accent is totally weird and out there, so okay. Note taken. Um, I haven't been doing that much particles a day last week, last 2 weeks actually. Partly because E3, I was helping a small indie team with a crunch, and the weather was really nice, and me and my girlfriend wanted to take the opportunity to actually enjoy the weather, hang out with friends, that kind of stuff. So that's that. And to kind of repay the favor of your patience, or me just feeling guilty because of that. Um, yeah, I'm also gonna do some occasional tutorial kind of thing, a bit like Matthew Wedstein's What the Fuck Is. And basically he explains all kinds of material and blueprints notes, and in my case I'll be explaining some of the particle modules like the spawn and the overtime of life, all kinds of things. And I wanted to start with that today, so let's get cracking. So let me turn off the camera, there we go. I mean, you don't want to see my face the whole time. I made a new folder in my toolkit, and let's create a new folder for particles. I'll probably try to explain what the nodes do, and occasionally we'll make an example, so that's why I'm making a folder for now. Let's create a particle system, and just call it part module. And which module shall we start with? I think the required node, because that's the first one you'll encounter. And maybe just the particle system overall, so just call it part module required. Oh, there we go. Just in case, I'm gonna add a number here so everything's in order. Will be in order. There we go. Okay, this will actually be very easy. Let's actually start with just the black screen. If you click somewhere here in the blackness of the emptiness space, you actually have the details menu here, which is a bit different than whenever you select something here. System update mode we can ignore. Update time in frames per second should will be fine. Warm up time, it's actually starting to be interesting. Actually, update time FPS, if you are making sure that your game runs on 30 FPS, then just do it like this, but 60 should be fine in most cases. The warm-up time, let's say you have some kind of random effect. Normally when you start the sim, you have this, it starts, and sometimes you don't want that, so you can have a warm-up time of 4. That way, whenever you start, it is already as a 4-second spawn kind of effect. So if it's 0, it starts growing. 1, 2, 3, 4. In that moment, that's what you get when you put in 4 seconds here. That way you'll make sure that there isn't some weird growing effect for your smoke or whatever whenever you enter a room and the particle starts emitting. So yeah, that's that. The warm-up tick rate. I'm actually not entirely sure. Apparently increasing it improves performance, decreasing improves accuracy. And in theory, 0 should be fine. Unless you want something very specific. I think if you upgrade increasing improves performance, decreasing accuracy. You can actually not go over, so it's always 0, so it's always the maximum amount of accuracy. Okay. It's okay. System C axis oriented towards the camera. I never used that seconds before inactive. If the center of this particle, this 0, 0, 0 local space for this thing, is not in view, Then you can set the amount of time here that you want it to still emit stuff before it dies out. So if I do this in 10 seconds and then rotate around, it will still spawn for an additional 10 seconds before it dies. And that's about it. In most cases 0 is more than enough, but for fires, small torches, that kind of thing, you might want to up this a little bit so that the fire doesn't instantly die out, because that might give some weird effect. Most of the time 1 or 2 seconds is more than enough, but then again it really depends on what you're making and what you're using it for. Time to warm up the system for the thumbnail image. Yeah, you can use real time. That way it gets rendered real time in your viewport. Let me save. How far I know. And then I need additional. I think it's 4 seconds here as well. It should be updating, but I never had any luck with that. So there, I mean, thumbnail boom, much better, static, makes the content browser actually run better. If you have real-time thumbnails on, it actually takes some performance, so I always turn that off. Just a small tip. Same actually with viewport. Whenever I don't need it, I tend to turn it off. Lately I keep forgetting about it, but meh. Okay, what's next? Okay, moving down. LOD distance check time. Basically how much time it takes before it checks if it needs another additional LOD. You can set the LODs here, which is something I'll explain much later. But normally it's 4 times every second. But you can, in most cases, increase that a little bit to gain a little bit of performance, because it does need that ticking going on. Load methods automatically, directly set active automatically. Just automatic. I never tend to touch that. The LOD distances, well, that kind of explains it. Every 100 meters for an LOD. And for LOD settings, I have actually no idea. Let's check. Let's check it out. Let's be adventurous. Insert what? 0 members, 0. I have no idea. So maybe I'll come back to that later if I'm actually playing around with LODs. Okay, bounce. This is actually for GPU particles mostly, but it also works for CPU particles, ribbons, that kind of stuff. It basically gives you some kind of bounding box, which I can actually show you. I probably need to set something up for that. Let's see. If you overlay, where was it? I think you just when you enable GPU particles. Maybe it was an older version. Check new GPU particle systems. And let's go to bounce. Actually, I don't think you see anything up. Basically, bounce are whenever the bounce to show the particle. If you don't see that bounce, then the particle will not be emitted. So in theory, yeah, as you can see, the core of the emitter is at the moment at 0, 0, 0, X, Y, Z. So if I just go out a little bit, there you go. It's not visible anymore. It's still spawning, but it's not visible. See if I can actually show triangles, if it doesn't crash. Okay, that's fine. Oh, it's not showing them here. Okay, that's weird. Never mind then for that. A few modes. There we go. And if I increase this like minus 100, etc., 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 it should spawn a little bit. The thing is that only works when you restart in UE4. So you just have to take my word for it. It now works until you have like 100 units upwards. Okay, that was poor English. Apologies for that. Basically, in this case, there's some 200 by 200 by 200 hull around this particle now, and as long as you can see that 200 by 200 by 200 unit box, then it will be spawning. If not, it will disable itself. And in most cases, whenever I'm lazy, I just do minus 10,000, minus 10,000, and 10,000. Obviously, if you're using this for a torch or whatever, then you can just put in the average length of your hallways or something like that. That's totally fine. But this works for me being lazy. How long the particle system should delay when activate system call? Yeah, I never use that really because in the required node there's also a delay, which I find more useful. But basically, I think if you put it like to a second or so, it takes about a second before the particle starts emitting. You can actually try that, but I am not sure if that works. So 1, yeah, so that's the delay. I think if you have a 2, then there's a bit more random. So it might be 1, might be 2 seconds. And use delay range, of course, it needs to be enabled. There we go. But yeah, I'm not a fan of that one. Performance auto deactivate, which is actually quite interesting. But I never use it. Min time between ticks, I also ignore that. Macro UVs, that's something I actually never use, so I need to find out what that does. Occlusion, particle bounce or custom bounce. This is basically something like the bounce stuff you have here. So there's not really something you obviously need to test. You can just use the particle bounce like the ones you put in here, I think. Custom bounds are actually the same as something as you use here, so I tend to not use that. Materials, that's something I don't tend to use either. It's actually quite interesting. Array of named material slots for use by emitters of the system. Bleh, don't need it. Okay, I think that explains the regular particle stuff, at least some of it. I'm going to remove the GPU particle for now. Let's go over to required. Alright, required. This is probably the one thing you'll be using the most besides lifetime and that kind of stuff, of course, but you can do quite a lot of interesting things here. Obviously, you can set the immediate origin. So if I want it to be 100 high, then it will start there. A lot of people tend to use initial location for that, but you can actually also use this. Performance-wise, I don't think it will be any memorable impact hit. If you don't use this one or use this one, it's all fine. I tend to use initial location, but especially since initial location has a min and a max, of course. So start location, obviously it's factor uniform, so you have a min and a max there. But if you don't need that, then you can just do it in required if you really want to. The same with emitter rotation. If you want to rotate the emitter, let's say I want to rotate this 90 degrees, I think it's 90, then actually the emitter starts spawning the other way. This can also be useful for meshes, so if you have a mesh that isn't properly rotated or used for other stuff as well, then you can rotate it in the required node. Screen alignment, that's a bit harder to explain, but let's go. Square is in most cases the normal one. It's fine, it rotates with whatever you're watching, and that's all it does. Facing camera position, should almost be the same. It has a bit more rotation effect, I think. But that's about it. It also explains it here. It faces the camera position, but it's not dependent on the camera rotation. This method produces more stable particles under camera rotation. Now, yeah, that says it all. Square is the most uniform one. Rectangle, that's actually the only one I think with initial size that let's use extremes, that has particles that are ununiformly sized. Yeah, there you go. So could have like 25 and 5, and put 5 here so you can see better. Some of them are really flat now, some of them are actually very long. That's actually with extremes, with something I'll explain later again as well. But yeah, let's go back to required, and just to be sure, let's change these again. Actually, that's what there we go. That's what PSA rectangle does. So that can actually be quite interesting. Then we have velocity, and that way it will always look at the angle, and sorry about that, the direction it's going. As you can see, the ones that are moving a bit more to the left will rotate slightly. So let's actually increase the velocity on the x-axis a bit more. Let's do 100. As you can see, they are now tilted. Let's do that as well. You can see it quite clear. And this is also handy for GPU particles, because if you have a size by velocity, or size by speed as you would call it, and you put the y-axis to 10, then they'll become longer. And that doesn't work if you use another alignment like square. As you can see, it only works with velocity. Okay, continuing, square velocity away from center. Yeah, that kind of says it. It spawns away from center. Let me change the velocity a little bit, because at the moment it's both 100. How to explain this properly? I also think this is affected by a few other things. I need to disable size by speed. Actually, oh wait. Apparently, away from center also allows for non-uniform scaling. Okay, that I did not know. It's actually quite interesting. I wonder what else changes though when you use this. I don't really see anything change besides that. It's quite hard to figure out. Apparently it does kind of work like velocity, but maybe it changes from only away from. Okay, let me try something real quick. Let's put that to 1 again, and let's give this a 10. 5 should be enough. Okay, and just for test's sake, we're gonna put this to 20, or minus 20 actually. I'm gonna reduce the spawn rate a little, so I can see what's going on. I think it's basically almost the same as just velocity, but it's more dependent on left or right going instead of velocity. But that's fine. Not much I can explain from that. And type specific. Use the alignment method indicated in type in the type data module. Okay, type data module, and that's this. So that's type specific in case mesh, data, ribbon, etc. Not really something you'll tend to touch a lot. Let's go back to square. Use local space. That's actually something I can explain quite easily. In viewport you have motion, and as you can see it's now moving around. Let me increase the spawn rate a little so you can see that more properly. Okay, as you can see it's now moving around because it's not local space. So whenever the emitter is moving, this particle system will move with it. But if you go back to no motion and go back to enable local space, enable motion again. As you can see, it's not moving. This is because it now has local space activated. It's sometimes so annoying to explain stuff in English when you're Dutch, so let's do something that explains it much easier. There we go. The difference between local space and not local space will be the following. There you go. If it's local space, the particles, no matter where you move, will always just move upward from the source. Let me disable the freaking grid. There we go. So no matter where this particle is, no matter how you move, it will be locally moving upwards. It will always follow the local 0 point of that emitter, as you can see. But if I actually disable local space, these particles just stay where they were emitted, as you can see now. That probably explains it better. There. Whee! Okay, what else? Kill and deactivate. If you deactivate the emitter through the blueprint code or whatever, then yeah, let me explain it better. If these parts are still emitting because they have, like, for instance, long lifetime, let me just up that up just for some sake, and go back to these menus here. If you deactivate this at this moment, with kill and deactivate on, all the particles will die. If it's disabled, like this, then if you deactivate this emitter, all the particles that were spawned just slowly die out, and there won't be any new ones. But if you enable it, all these particles that are moving outwards will die instantly, so they will just disappear, which can be really ugly. It helps with kind of projectile particles. Maybe if you hit the enemy, then you don't want some of the particles to maintain, then you can kill them. Sometimes if you like blow out a fire, the fire that's already upwards should not disappear that fast. So there's that. And the same is actually for kill and complete. You can do it for the blueprints. I also think that if you have required on loop and the loop ends, then it should also just kill itself. I'm not really sure if that's actually a thing, but that's the way I guess it works. Alright. Next time I should make a note for myself to set up a blueprint to explain some stuff like that better, but okay. Let's do something else. The sort modes. Basically, that is how the particles are sorted, because they are sometimes all on the same layer, exact same location, just maybe a little bit different on height or whatever. And then you have a few options here to change that. Let's start with the ones that I know best. H newest first. So let me actually stop the motion here. Make the screen bigger again. Reduce the amount of velocity. So 10, 10, 0, 0, because who cares? And let's make the velocity 50 on both as well. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of overlapping going on. And if you go with newest first, then the particle that's emitted last will be up front. So that's the one you will see first. Everything that's older will be behind that one. The other way of that is oldest first. That way the oldest particle will be seen first, and everything that's spawned after that will be later, will be behind that. This is actually quite handy for most smoke trails, because how do I explain this better? Newest first is actually, yeah, it's quite hard to explain without a good example. But I tend to use oldest first for smoke trails. That way the ones that were already emitted are on top. That gives a very nice thick line. And newest first might be better with some kind of sparks and fires and that kind of stuff. But it depends on what feels best. And let's see, distance to view. In this case, yeah, it kind of explains it all. The ones that are closer to you will be seen first. So let's do -20, and the bounds are still messing up. But the ones that are actually closest to me will actually be more visible, and everything else gets overlapped, and that's behind the ones that are closer to the view. Okay. Pro depth, yeah, that says it all. Sort view by projected depth of the particle. I actually basically never used this one. I don't feel that there's anything over none, so that's it. Use legacy emitter timing, never use. Orbit module affects velocity alignment. I have not used this one either, but then again, I don't use the orbit module that much to really go in depth with that. Okay, next. Duration, how long the particle lasts. So let's say the emitter loops only once, and the duration is 1 second. And I think I need to disable something somewhere in here. Let's do the on. There we go. Warm time now disabled. Is there anything else? Seconds before inactive. Let's just put it to 0 again. Anything else I might have missed? No. Okay. So back on track. Where were we? Required node duration. So whenever something starts, then the particle emits for 1 second and loops only once. If this duration is 2, it will emit for 2 seconds and then dies out because it loops only once. In this case, if I add 2 loops, it will loop twice, so it will now emit for 4 seconds and then die out. And it will now start again. Alright. Let's put this on 2. Yeah, you understand it. I mean, now it will last for 200 seconds, etc, etc, etc. And let's put back the emitter loops to 1. Okay, I never tend to use the duration lows, and yeah, I'm not really sure what to say about that, because I never need them. So there might be some cases, but yeah, I can't really explain that. Emitter use range, duration recalculate each loop. Yeah, never tend to use that either. Emitter loops I just explained. Delay, that's actually one that's very helpful. Okay, if I do a delay of 0.5, it will take half a second before it actually starts. And then uses the emitter duration, it will swan for a second and it loops only once. So if I have 1 second, it will wait 1 second, emit 1 second and loop only once. And if I only delay the first loop, like this, then it will wait 1 second and then spawns a second, loops once. So if I loop now like 3 times, it will emit 3 seconds in one go. But it first starts with a delay of 1 second. Then it will loop 3 times, 1 second each, so a 3 second total. Alright, sub-UVs, that's actually for fires and flames. I think I will explain that more properly when I'll actually go into particle sub-UVs and that kind of thing, because there's actually a note here, sub-UV image index and sub-UV movie, and I think it will be more relevant to explain it then than now. What else is there? Macro UV, I tend to never use that. Rendering, this is actually an optimization thing. You don't really need to use it, but in some cases you actually might want to touch it. If you really want to use the max draw count, you can like set it to 5. And it should actually spawn a lot less. It doesn't always do it properly, but it should. Let's just keep it at it should. If I have 0, it should spawn a lot more. If I actually start a view, where are you? Oh wait, now it's spawning nothing. It normally is 500. So it now spawns the maximum amount. There we go. So if it's a maximum amount of about a total of, let's say 40. Yeah, 39, 40. So if I wanted to spawn a maximum of 20 in total, there we go, it won't spawn the last 20. It will keep it up to 40, but that's about it. If I only want to spawn 5, and spawns 5 now, and spawns 5 after that, those die. And in normal cases that works. So I haven't seen it a few times where it just fails and I don't know exactly what happens, but it works now. That's nice. Okay, so if you want to do some optimization, then this might be a good way to actually limit the amount of particles drawn. In this case, let's do 500. Keep in mind that you can actually go over this amount, because if you use GPU particles, then you can just spawn 10,000 and this will be totally ignored. UV flipping mode, that actually can be handy, especially if you use some kind of random. That way, let's try and set it up properly so you can see it better. Let's disable emitter loops and disable the delay so it keeps spawning again. Let's go down again. If you flip UVs, then the red is on the right side and with none should be on the left side. This way, if you have like want some extra additional variation, you can actually set it to random flip UV. That way, some of the UVs will be flipped, and that gives, especially fire and some other stuff, some additional variation, which is quite handy. There's also some that you can only flip on the U axis, like this, or on the vertical V axis, or as I said, for both. This way it's upside down, left and right, mirrored, in all kinds of ways. For fire, obviously you only might want to use the U axis. And for lightning, you might actually want to use the V only. And this one is basically a combination of U and V separately compared to this one. And this is always forced, so it only flips it all the time. It only flips the U, or horizontal, it only flips the vertical. Always. Okay, that's it. The normals, I never tend to touch it. I actually should go into learning, understanding that, but I actually have no idea what it does at the moment. So somebody will probably rage about that, but I have no idea what it does. Well, I have an idea what it does, but I shouldn't start explaining because maybe I'm totally wrong, and then I'll come over as an ass. Okay, that actually explains most of the required node and actually the basic details menu of the particles. And if I have time tomorrow, I will explain spawn. That's it for now, and take care.